Well, we are grateful to have you talk for people who are learning about scoring for the first time, which is something I know is a real thing. We've
Right.
actually encouraged our son who does a lot of music producing. Is like, you need to be thinking about scoring because you know that's going to be an area. Talk to us about what it means to be a part of a scoring orchestra and what we typically, who's typically scoring film and games, and why it was you wanted to put your foot in this particular arena.
So, who's typically scoring films and games and virtual reality platforms are men. My
Mm.
purpose is to be an advocate and representation for females because there is a lack thereof.
What does it mean to
Especially,
score? What is that?
what does it mean to score is you compose the music, the soundscape for the visual. So
Huh.
you would the person the musician or the composer would craft either the underscore, the music or the soundscape under the dialogue, or the transition in between the scenes, or the big huge cinematic trailers that we hear, the music for the trailers, that is all score. And the orchestra um performs the written score.
So when we're watching a film, and if the sound is off, we feel one way. But when the sound is on and we can hear the music, then we're like, oh no, something bad about to happen. Like the music can literally take your emotions on a film or even a commercial, or just some sort of visual medium from one of elation and joy and hope and optimism. And then you hear da 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 da, and then you hear like the Jaws sound, for example, and that is an example of how music can take you from thinking, oh, this is a great film about it. Well, you would know it's not a film about enjoying a day on the beach if you saw the media for it. But if you're watching the film, you stumble into a room and you see these people at the beach, you might experience one set of emotions. But then when you hear that Jaws soundtrack, it's like, oh snap, girl, get out the water. You don't even know what's happening in the film, but the music can take you and fill in the gaps of knowledge. And that is, if I understand you correctly, that's what the scoring of a film is. It's the musical component that helps to shape the actual story itself. Is that right?
That is exactly right. It
Okay.
drives our emotional journey. It's the backdrop of our, of the sound, of our
Yeah.
emotions, of
Yeah.
what we feel. What would it also sends us on a trajectory and gives us a reason to keep watching it, to be perfectly honest with you. Because
Oh,
if the sound is trash, it doesn't really do anything for you visually, if that makes
right.
sense.
Right. So I think of a lot of films or the mediums, visual mediums that I've seen that have like a real powerful musical component. So The Wiz, for example, like The Wiz ain't the same without the music, and like that level of musicality really helps to drive that story. For people who are more familiar with something more recent, like Game of Thrones, that song at the beginning, child, if you was a part of the Game of Thrones world, that song hit, and you was like, all right, everybody be quiet. It draws you in emotionally, and that I think speaks really to the power of music. And one of the reasons why we need more people like you who are owning our rights to be in this space. But you use an orchestra. Now, a lot of us, when we think about music for a film, we're thinking, somebody goes into a room and they download their little Fruity Loops or whatever programs they're using, and they just put the music together. But you have an actual orchestra. Talk to us about what that component is like and why you wanted to go that route. And does everybody who scores a film, do they all have orchestras? Give us a sense as to what that looks like.
No, everybody that scores a film do not have orchestras, and a lot of composers cannot afford the orchestra. Because
Oh.
a lot of times an orchestra is not fit into the budget, into the music production budget, and that was something that I was running into, representing these female film composers. We're already in the single digit. Well, now the teens. I mean, we've evolved a little bit,
Right.
so we're in a low percentile,
Right.
so our representation, there was no representation for us when we came into this. So to have an orchestra, is just about having live instrumentation. It's a totally different experience from someone just going in their bedroom. I mean, no shade to those that do.
No
Listen,
shade, but this different.
okay, it is different. It's a different experience. So this
Yeah.
orchestra is not a symphony orchestra. It's a big difference. A symphony orchestra is one that is a body of musicians that put on concerts and they go on tours, and
Mm.
they're in theater halls and concert halls and things like that. We don't do that. We're typically We're a typical orchestra, but we only do recording inside of a studio, and
So
it
that's
may
got to
not.
be a huge studio. Like, how many people are in this orchestra?
Well, it's a 50-piece orchestra, but listen, I don't say no to stuff. I'm just gonna keep it all the way above. I don't say no to stuff. And
Come on, sis.
a budget may not call for all 50 players. So a
Okay.
budget may warrant 15, a small 15 chamber ensemble. It
Wow.
may just call for the string section or the percussion section. So it just really depends. So it depends on the project, the budget of the project. But I shouldn't say I don't say no to stuff because I actually do say no to stuff. I do this with integrity.
I like
Yeah.
that. That's one of
There's a
my
lot of
favorite words.
intention. Yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
intention behind what I do. I don't just do it just to be doing it. It's a lot of intention and thought that goes into it.
How did you, what was it that brought you to the decision to start this? Because you could have easily just, kept doing your music industry thing. What was it that compelled you to broaden out into this particular arena?
I came from the world of film and TV. I've been, oh my God, I've worn so many hats under that umbrella. I've been a makeup artist. I've directed short films and little, PSAs for, for different organizations. And so I landed in fast forward. I was in post-production. Post-production introduced me to this because I did some story producing. In story producing, you're actually putting together the story. This what you see on TV, story producers bring it all together with the editor. So I was introduced to this from being in that seat because I saw that there was, again, there wasn't a lot of representation. There was a gap in female composers. It introduced me to licensing, getting permission for people's IP, that whole world, which is a whole other conversation that we can talk about. You know, um, um, ownership of music works, how to. So there was a lot of variables that went into my decision to do this, and I saw that a lot of females that were composers were being managed by men, and they were being cheated out of
Wow.
credits. They weren't being credited properly. So
Wow.
I says, you know what, I can't it's not someone else's responsibility for because they're not going to do it, so I have to do it myself. I have to do the work
Mm,
myself. I did a lot of research before I got into this. It was a lot of research for me to even stand in the seat of being the first Black female founder. i didn't
right.
believe I didn't believe that.
Wow.
I had to do work.
Wow.
I had to do research. A lot of this is about research. You're an attorney. That's research.
Listen, research drives everything. It drives everything.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
what's interesting to me is that you said you were already in the industry and then you
Okay.
got exposed to some realities that made it clear for you. Wait a minute, there's this whole other arena that I'm not tapping into. Earlier this week, we had on a brother, Jonah, what's Rick's last name? Digi Productions. Rick Martin. We had Rick Martin on, and one of the things he was talking about, because he does a phenomenal production of materials, merchandise, and whatnot with a variety of celebrities and folks. And one of the things that he talked about was that he didn't at first know anything about this particular end of the industry until he got exposure, and then he learned, wait a minute, it's not just exposure to the fact that this is a marketing, or this is a tool, this is a financial entrepreneur area that I could delve into. Then he learned about all of the ways in which the money is able to infiltrate the industry, or if you don't have access to the money, how you cannot infiltrate the industry. And the lack of exposure often keeps so many of us from being able to understand how we can make a thing work. And Ellie Mistal, phenomenal attorney, and thinker on some of these things. He's been writing for The Nation for some time, and he talks about the fact that I don't know if you watch, but on MSNBC, Joyanne Reed, her last show was this Monday, and he talks about in this article about how when you don't have someone in a position like a Joyanne Reed, what that means is that everybody coming behind her, like him and all the other Black pundits and pontificators that we've all come to know and appreciate, most we appreciate, not all, but he says that the reason they got to be in those spaces spaces was because somebody like Joy put them on. And if you don't have somebody like Joyanne Reed who is in these positions able to do this work to put them on, or a Melissa Harris Perry, or a what's the other sister's name, Tiffany Cross, when you don't have people in positions who are willing to use their power, their skills, their knowledge about this arena to build a pipeline for people, that's how we end up having to figure stuff out on our own, and then we don't get to move forward. You obviously understand that at a very fundamental level. Talk to
For
us about
sure.
some of the steps that you had to take to go from realizing that to now building and manifesting this amazing accomplishment.
Well, it started with conversations with these female film composers. It started with, what they would about their human experiences in these spaces, how they were received, how they represent themselves, how they represent their music, and what their music, what are you doing this for? Why are you doing this? What is your intention behind all of this? Are you doing this just to make money? Are you doing this to entertain people? Why are you telling these types of stories? So I had to really, as a part of the research, that was a part of the research experience. So it wasn't
Huh.
just and I learned a lot. I learned that there were different experiences. I had some ladies that experienced Me Too. I had Me Too,
Mm,
yeah, and they just wanted to end it all. And I'm like, listen, that's I don't I have compassion for your experience, but I don't know if that's the right solution
right.
based on how significant you can move lives with your art and craft. You know,
Mm,
how influential you can be to somebody. You can save somebody else from someone else who has experienced this with your own art and craft. So I think, having those, learning all of that is what drove me. And also, it wasn't about, I wanted to be someone that they needed, someone that I needed in my most
mm.
vulnerable
Yes.
in my life. I just wanted to be that for them, end an eviction, help somebody pay for babysittings. It's deeper than being a representation and champion for their interests in their art. Sometimes it's deeper than that. So these ladies
Mm,
are mothers, they
yeah.
sisters, they wives. I have to be
Yeah.
compassionate for their experience outside of the recording studio as well. So all of those things had to be taken into consideration as I jumped into this.
Yeah. So walk us through it. You have a realization that you can be a mover and a shaker in this space. You can be pivotal in creating this pathway of opportunities for people. How? What happened next? Like how did you do it?
Well, before I got into representing female composers, I was a manager for like producers,
Okay.
producers in everywhere, Italy, France, South
Mm,
Africa,
mm.
here in the States.
How did you
Um,
get into producing? What was that path? I mean, is this a major in college? Did you know, like, because I got a lot of people who want to be connected to the music industry in this audience. How did you get into producing?
in post production, I didn't really was like, where y'all getting this music from? This is not real music. It was just sound bites from libraries, you know,
Wow.
and a lot of it was AI,
Huh.
So it's free game for everybody. Free game for everybody is AI is, and no
Right.
one was who's getting paid for this? Is
Right.
this a livable wage for these people? So that's what
Mm.
introduced, okay, there's a gap here. I'm a
Huh.
unicorn in this space and I'm a disruptor. And that's okay. You know what I mean?
Process.
Sometimes you have to put on your a-hole t-shirt. You know what I mean?
There you go. There you go.
But yeah, sometimes you just have to do it. But that's how it got started. So what that looks like is this. I show up in spaces. I'm not a work the room type of person. I'm nervous as hell to be sitting here talking to you,
Me
right?
too, child. I am not at work the room kind of. I'd be like, oh my God, okay, put your game face on, girl. Put your game face on. You got to show up. You got to show up.
Show up.
Yes.
So I had to have compassion for that sensitivity. You know what I mean? I'm not
Hmm.
a work the room
Hmm.
type of person, but I knew there was an objective. There was a job that needed to be done. I needed to show up for people that needed someone to show up for them.
Wow.
So I, placed myself in places where I could overhear opportunities, um, and email people that needed to be emailed. Sometimes it's about sitting on your sofa and watching, movies and just going through the catalog on the platform and see who the green light people are and
Hmm.
shoot them a message. And so, but
You really
also,
did do your research.
yeah, you have to do your research because you can't just
Yeah,
cold email people. You got to know what they've worked on and, and give them flowers if they deserve the flowers, or you just
right.
move on to the next one.